The reason for this duo who are presenting are because I discovered when I went to Hanish's class, her mathematics class, that she had many students there who were in my digital class. And today we're lucky enough to have two students who are going to be our student voice. We've actually got Nicola, who's in the maths class, in my social studies class, and Daniel, who's not in the maths class, but is in my social studies class. And we were both looking at student autonomy. So, and I guess we looked at this, we had the same ideas, didn't we, about student autonomy, though we went about it slightly differently. So this is really what we thought student autonomy was all about, with students taking ownership of their learning. So this is what was happening in social studies, in that we did a big shift this year from a lot of teacher-based work in the first semester, and then we shifted to more inquiry learning and a lot more group work with students taking ownership, and in particular with their assessments. So they had quite a few choices, and we planned to have more and more choices as we went on. So we're going to switch now to Kailash.
Sure. In terms of
maths bit,
what we did in math. Now this was a big shift for me, because I'm very much the controlling type of personality. Everything organised from start to finish, and this is the way it's going to go. So being part of this autonomy concept was really new for me in terms of letting go and letting the students take ownership of what was going to happen in the classroom. So when I came back in, in terms of mathematics, the topic that we were looking at was geometry. Now usually within geometry, what would happen is you'd have 3 weeks, the typical classroom would be 3 weeks of teaching and then an assessment at the end. So with the autonomous type mindset, started back to front and said to the students, what we're going to focus on first is the review activity. And I think many, like Nicola, would be going, what do you mean, miss? What are we reviewing? You haven't even taught us anything yet. So what I said to the class was, we are going to start back to front. Instead of looking at a review task that typically, is this the right way up by the way? Yes. So this is what we typically do at the end of the 3-week period, and we give them a little mini assessment and see where their gaps are, and then start trying to fix those and so that they'll be more successful in the test. I said, I don't want to see anything like that, because that's still pretty controlling. But the outline that you've got is, you're going to come up with a review activity. You can do anything you like in terms of the review activity. The only specs are that it has to contain material on geometry and the material that we're going to cover. And I was quite surprised that the penny didn't drop in the students to say, but miss, we haven't been taught anything. And I said, don't panic. What's going to happen is you're going to get some checkpoints. And what we're going to do is each week you're going to get a snippet of time where you'll be able to work on your review activity. And I thought that would be quite a good way of doing spiral review. You know, rather than moving on to the next concept, they'd have time to work on what they would do in their activity. It was really interesting. In the first week, some of them were just dumbfounded and didn't quite know what to do in terms of a review activity. It was a digital class, and it's quite interesting. Nathan, I was quite surprised that he would want to move away from the computer because he's so computer focused, to come up with a different activity. Some of the students decided to go with board games, which was really exciting for me to see. Some of them went back to some childhood memory type games. So it's just really interesting in terms of what they came up with. It was a really eye-opening experience for me, in being able to step back. Would I do it again? Not quite sure if I would. Anyways, I'll pass it back to Gwen.
Okay. All right. Our link to the PLG readings is really simple. It was on the first page, but this is what it was all about. And interestingly, on Wednesday I went to Alfriston College, and the keynote speaker was talking about what motivates students, what engages students, is when it gives them a buzz and where they do have a choice, and it does link into their interests. So giving things over to students is really quite important to do. Also, Heidi Langston had lent me a book earlier in the year called The Lazy Teacher's Handbook, which is not about being lazy in the classroom, but saying, guess what, you don't have to do all of the work for the students. You set it up, the work, you scaffold it, and then the students do the work. So I don't know what our two student voices are going to say, because we've given them carte blanche to say whatever they like. They have some questions to answer. But the whole idea was student autonomy actually develops engagement, that develops learning and persistence and so on. So this is what we've been doing in social studies. So this last term we've been looking at who has the money, and yes, there was teaching ahead of time, which was about what enterprise is all about. And what I've got is very small, because I don't want you to read it, but they did get scaffolded tasks for their assessment, so they knew what they had to cover for the assessment. So these bits I don't really want you to read, but they had 4 things they had to cover. But this was the important part, that they actually had choice. So the choice was about choosing an entrepreneur, how they worked individually or in pairs this time, and how to present their findings. It was up to them how they did that. And do you want to say anything more about this? So we'll just go on to the last bit, the student voice, which is to do with our students. And so we're going to be as interested to hear what they thought about this autonomy and independent learning. So we've got Nicola and Daniel who need to come up front, and then they are going to tell you, and it's going to be as interesting to us as it hopefully is for you. So Nicola was the one who was in both classes, and Daniel is just in social studies. Okay, so we've got a series of questions, and you can read that question. The first one is about social studies, and I really wanted to know which way of learning they preferred. The first semester, when I was doing work and they had activities to do that were prescribed, or when they were given a wide choice of how they were going to go about achieving what was set out. So over to you guys.
Personally, I probably prefer the independent learning, because it sort of gave you like more sense of responsibility with what you had to do, because you were sort of running it yourself. But also, it was more like you could, I don't know how to say it, like put your interests, because it's something that interests you in your learning, because you got to choose like which entrepreneur you could do and your presentation style and stuff. So it was more like, it just seemed easier and more, I don't know, personal.
I personally prefer the independent learning, because I got to take responsibility for my own learning, and it gave me more motivation to get a higher grade, as to where if a teacher was organising it and you had certain options, and sometimes you don't necessarily, you want to do something like your own way instead of having an outline of what you had to do. So for this particular project we had choice of what we could do, and that gave us more options, and it gave us more like less of a boundary as to what we could do. So our only limit was our imagination.
Okay, so we've got question 2. Do you feel more motivated this way?
Yes, I do, because you will really want to impress your teacher and show them that you have the skills to take on learning yourself. You have what it takes to take control of your own learning. So yeah, it just has that feeling of you really want to do well, rather than, oh, it's okay, the teacher's going to do it for us. Like, the teacher's doing a lot of the work for us. You're more like, it's on your shoulders, like you have the responsibility.
Yeah, it does motivate you a lot more, because you realise there is no one like there, you're completely in control, so you know what you have to do, and you are really like in demand of what you need to do and how things are going to span out for you, and how there's nobody else to really fall back on and say, oh, it was their fault or anything. You have to motivate yourself, and it does motivate you to get a better grade because you're taking the load, you know what you're doing, so you're responsible for it.
Right, I should say that Daniel created something on Tumblr, which was very interesting for me to get into Tumblr and to grade it from using Tumblr. And he worked in a pair, and Nicola, this assessment worked on her own. So this one's a little bit more difficult. Do you think you're learning to learn, if that makes sense?
Sort of a difficult question. Like, I think I know where they're coming from. It's like, as you're doing your own thing and you're doing more independent learning, you're learning more skills and like more ways to become a more active learner and to take in ideas and stuff and work in a group. So like all the little aspects of independent learning like come into learning to learn.
You are really learning to learn because you're picking up different techniques of what your teacher said, and you're using techniques that you've learned, and being in group work in the class, you're taking different learning ideas from other people. So other people are kinesthetic learners and other people are visual learners. You're taking different learning ideas from the different learners. It's all coming together for your benefit, so you really are learning all the different ways you can learn.
And so moving on, in maths, you have to create a task without direction. Did that help you learn more?
It did, because you took your prior knowledge of what you had, and we kind of forgot a lot of it because it was last year that we touched on it a little bit, but it did help us with the time that we had. We'd have a little bit of maths work, and then we'd get ideas from that and put it into our game or our review activity, and all along the way you were learning different things and you're putting them into your activity, so it did help us to learn a lot more than what we originally knew, and what we did know we put a bit of that in, and then all the things that we didn't know we'd also put that in as well, which helped us, and it's a lot of fun, so I'd like to do it again.
And the last one, because it has to be Nicola, because she was the only one in the maths class.
It did help us to understand it more because there were lots of other people who did the task, like everyone in the class did it, and they all had different ideas on what we were doing, so when they presented you took in more knowledge on the subject, and from your own learning you could kind of reflect on it, and it did help a lot.
So this has been a really important journey for us. So, you know, pluses and minuses along the way, and we will get better. So thank you guys, brilliant.